Howdy, folks. It's your old pal David Cobb here. As you know, I had the privilege of being the campaign manager for Jill Stein and Ajamu Baraka. And as we always say at the start of the Green News Network program known as Democracy in Action, with a nod to Gil Scott-Heron, it may be true that the revolution will not be televised, but it will be brought to you over non-corporately filtered sources of news, information, and analysis like the Green News Network. And it is an appropriate introduction for the show today. I'm going to jump right into it because my guest today is Desmond Meade. Desmond is the president of the Florida Voting Rights Coalition. He is the chairman of Floridians for a Fair Democracy. He is also the chair of the Black Men's Roundtable, which is part of the Florida Coalition on Black Civic Participation. Desmond Meade, welcome to the Green News Network and Democracy in Action.
David, thank you for having me on. It's definitely a pleasure. I know there was a lot of titles there to read through, but you know, I think the most important one right now is president of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition because of the moment that we're in.
Well, we are in a hell of a moment. And before we get, I don't want to just push right off all those titles, Desmond, because I was telling you that when I meet people and it just comes up that I'm a lawyer, right? I often say I'm the most unusual lawyer you'll ever meet. I can't say that anymore because I've met you, right? So I got to tell you, viewers, so Desmond Meade, he's there, he's got the Let My People Vote. He's the president of the Florida Voting Rights Coalition. He's got all those kind of titles. But let me tell you something. It's okay to go here, right, Desmond?
It's okay. Go on in.
Let me tell you something. So here's his path to become a lawyer. Dismissed from the Army because he was caught stealing liquor while stationed in Hawaii. Caught a felony conviction. Ended up homeless. Dude somehow ends up with a law degree and then ends up fighting in order to be able to actually become a lawyer in the state of Florida. How am I doing so far, Desmond?
You're doing all right. You know, you got to put in the drug addiction part too.
And so I guess what I'm saying here is I'm trying to actually deconstruct the mystique that, some people often have, Desmond, around lawyers and oh, this, that, or the other thing. Clearly you worked hard, right? But I do want to really use you as an example of the trajectory as a social change agent. So when you talk about the injustices of either being a black man in this society or being a houseless person in this society or having to fight for your rights in this society, this is not just an intellectual exercise for you, is it?
Oh, no. I tell people today that I have a dual doctorate degree, right? I have a doctor's in law and a doctor's of the streets degrees. So I'm uniquely positioned to really bring a very interesting perspective to discussions such as we're talking about today around criminal justice, things of that nature.
And, so Desmond, where are you from originally? Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Miami, Florida. I did spend some time in the Chicago area. But of course, that cold weather and that hawk coming off of Lake Michigan.
Drop the home, don't it?
It takes me right back down to Florida. But South Florida has basically been my home all my life. But I was born in the U.S. Virgin Islands on the island of St. Croix.
Okay, and so again, I don't want to romanticize it, but let's just be real clear, right? So you had drug addictions. You've been homeless. You've actually served time as a convicted felon. So give us just the viewers who might be, meeting you for the first time. Give us your quick thumbnail for how you ended up where you are right now.
Well, David, I like to start in August of 2005. When I was in South Florida, standing in front of railroad tracks, waiting on a train to come so I can jump in front of it. Being homeless, I was homeless at the time, addicted to drugs, recently released from prison. The only thing I owned was the clothes on my back, and I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel, and I was ready to end it all. I didn't want to go take another step, and I was just waiting on that train to come, but that train didn't come. It didn't come that day, and so I did cross the tracks, and I checked myself into drug treatment, and from there to a homeless shelter while at the homeless shelter decide to go back to school. You know, but I tell people today that if someone would approach me while I was standing at the tracks and tell me not to jump in front of a train because in 4 years I'm going to meet the president of the United States, not once but twice, sit on boards with mayors and commissioners and attorney generals, and even lead a fight such as this, you know, the first question I would ask them is where they get their good drugs they smoking. You know, because there's no way that you could have convinced me that a homeless, suicidal, drug addict, you know, with a record, you know, a mile long, is going to be able to do that in such a short amount of time. But, you know, here I am today, and riding this exciting wave of transformation, not only for our state, but for our country. And, hey, you know, I came from humble beginnings, you know, but I think that, you know, people like me, there's so many of us that's out there that's been through the fire, and we've been battle tested. You know, when President Obama sent the SEALs to get rid of Osama bin Laden, he didn't send fresh recruits out of boot camp. He sent hardened veterans that been through some things, and so I like to tell people who've gone through prison or drug addiction and have come out of that they're battle-tested warriors that are going to be needed in order to change our society.
So, you know, I'm going to resist the urge to push back on some of the analogies, right? As a believer that the U.S. foreign policy has been, you know, one based on empire and death and destruction, right? Because you know that's true, right? You know, I'm speaking the truth. But
yes.
What I do want to do is get directly in to the work that you and others are doing in Florida for restoring the rights of folks to be able to vote in Florida. Because let's just be real clear, what we know is a combination of the racist criminal justice system and the way elections are conducted that overlap. There is a legalized Jim Crow that is happening against black and brown people, especially young black and brown men, to prevent them from voting. I'm going to ask, am I going too far, or would you say that's about right?
Well, Dave, I don't think you're going far enough. To be totally honest with you, I think that where we hurt ourselves is when we stop short, right? And just recognize the fact that this policy has its roots in the racial animus, right? Where it was implemented to keep the newly freed slaves from participating in the voting process, and that we know that it has a disproportionate impact on the African American community. If we were to stop there, we haven't gone far enough, because I can tell you now in Florida, where we have over 1.68 million people who cannot vote because of a prior felony conviction, the reality is that even though
I'm going to ask you to say that number again, because that's a big number.
Oh yeah, over 1.68 million people, which is more people than the population of over 15 U.S. states and territories and over 60 countries in the world. So that's a huge number. But here's the thing I'm trying to get at is that, you know, while African American men are disproportionately impacted, guess what, David? There are far more people who cannot vote in Florida because of a felony conviction that looks like you than there is that look like me.
Right.
And so to stop at the conversation about to stop at the racist intent of this policy would do it a disservice, because it would just exclude the other 2/3 of American citizens that are denied that basic right, or that basic ability. The one thing that speaks to American citizenship more than anything else in the world. All right, and you have over 2/3 of Americans that's denied that, and we need to address it.
And so I really appreciate you pushing back on me and forcing us into a conversation of intersectionality. Because let's be clear, the people who look like me, who are being targeted, are also mostly poor, right? So when we understand how racism and classism, we understand how the ruling elite have pitted people against each other on either race or gender or class or sexual orientation. Yeah. See, this is actually how they're playing that game. The other thing I want to be clear about and make sure that I understand, but I have, according to my research, more people in Florida, more convicted felons have been stripped from voting rights in Florida than any state in the union. Is that true?
You are 100% correct. Florida accounts for about a quarter, if not more, of the total amount of people in the entire United States who can't vote because of a prior felony conviction. And Florida is only one of 3 states that permanently disenfranchises its own.
And you just went to the very next place, because Florida does not just have, you know, there's I think it's New Hampshire, right, that actually even allows incarcerated people to vote.
Vermont.
And Vermont. Okay, so you know, that would be the ideal. That's the gold standard, right? But Florida is one of the few places that is actually one strike and you're out.
Yeah, yeah, and you're out for the rest of your life, right?
For the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So that brings us up to where you at right now, which is a voting rights ballot initiative. And I want to make sure that I'm understanding this. I think that just last month, the Florida Supreme Court actually ruled unanimously that this proposed constitutional amendment could actually be on the 2018 ballot.
Keyword, unanimously. That in itself is a tremendous feat. It really is.
It's amazing, and I know that the coalition was active in that. So, walk us through, how did we get to where we are now with this amazing 2018 ballot box?
Well, I think you know, it starts for right now at this space where we're at, especially when we're talking about how voting, nothing speaks to American citizenship more than voting, right? And identifying that there is inherently a problem, right? When politicians get to decide which American citizen get to vote and which don't get to vote.
Right.
Whether that politician is a Republican, a Democrat, whether they're independent, whether they're Tea Party, Green Party, Blue Party, or whatever kind of party, we know that having politicians with that much power leaves room for partisan politics to play a role in it. And so we knew going into this that the one main thing that we had to do was take that ability out of the hands of politicians and enshrine it in the state constitution to protect all citizens, no matter how they may think, right? No matter who we may think they want to vote for, it doesn't matter. What matters is that an American citizen have the opportunity to vote. And so we launched a petition a couple of years back, and that restores voting rights to individuals once they've completed their sentence. It does not apply to people convicted of murder or people convicted of felony sex offenses like rape, child molestation. But everyone else, once they have served their time, they get their rights restored. Now, I can tell you from the very beginning, you know, all of the experts and all of the consultants, you know, they told us that we'll never get this thing moving because we need a ton of money and we need this and we need that, you know, but we knew that we were standing on strong moral ground and we pressed ahead. And we actually made history in Florida last year by being able to trigger the Florida Supreme Court review of this actual ballot summary, title, and language. It's never been done before. We were able to collect over 70,000 verified signatures to make it happen. And then, of course, a few weeks ago, as you mentioned, the Florida Supreme Court. No, let me back up for a minute. When we triggered the Supreme Court review, the next thing that was noteworthy was that there was no opposition in the courts to what we were doing, to our amendment. Not the governor, not the attorney general, not the Speaker of the House, not the Secretary of State, or any other fringe group that could have weighed in with the courts on this issue. No one raised a red flag. No one had anything negative to say in the courts. And so when the courts issued its opinion a few weeks ago, it was indeed a unanimous opinion, and it was almost like the seal of approval. And we're moving forward with this organic grassroots movement, and we're talking
And
about
it really is bubbling up from the bottom, Desmond. This is the
from the
thing.
bottom.
I mean, again, Greens in Florida were involved, but I've been hearing about this from social movement people from across that I know about from across the state. So this is a big deal. I'm going to tell you, you did something that very few guests do here on Democracy in Action. I have not yet called for questions. They're already coming in. So I'm going to tell listeners, viewers, please do write in the comments section. Technical Director Michael O'Neill is going to be capturing them. He's already started that. We're going to start running through a couple of these. I'm going to invite you to continue to ask questions or make comments. Michael will capture those, share them with me. I'll share them with Desmond. And I'm going to ask you, the viewer, to also share this page on other Facebook pages. Email this link to other people. We need to put Desmond Meade's voice and his message in front of as many people as possible. And the way we do that is to share this link. Don't hate the corporate media, become the people's media. Desmond, I'm going to jump right in. Mary McKay writes in to ask, how are the voters so out of touch that we're allowing corrupt corporate politicians to mess with our voting rights in the first place?
That's a great question. And I have to share an adage that my mother told me a long time ago, and that is that the tail does not wag the dog wags the tail. And so I think that we have to shoulder some of that blame as a community, because we have lifted up politicians to a level to where they're carrying on as if they're the masters and we're the servants, when the reality is they're public servants. And I think we've lost sight of that, right? And so there's no other industry where a boss have to beg an employee to do something,
right?
And when they don't do it, the employee get a raise or even a promotion. That doesn't happen in any business.
Nowhere else.
Bad business. But in politics, it does. The reality is that we, as voting citizens, are the boss, and we hire or elect an employee to do our bidding, right? And so the thing is that when I want to see an elected official, I shouldn't have to wait 2 months to see a person who I hired. I shouldn't have to go through all kinds of loops. No. So I think we have to be more civically engaged and hold our elected officials more accountable, and have repercussions for their inability to follow our direction.
You mean unelect them if they ain't doing the right thing? Because I'm going to be really clear about this, Desmond.
I'm saying I brought you in this world, I'll take you out. And so I put you in office, I will take you out. And
that's it.
We have to be able to not only make the assertion, but to follow up on it.
And that's right. And I'm from Texas, right? And the great Texas politician Sam Rayburn once said this: as an elected official, when I feel the heat, I always see the light. And I'm going to tell you something. I think, for real, Desmond, part of our problem is we've not been generating enough political heat.
Yes.
We have not been taking our power seriously. And that actually brings me to the next comment. Marcus Sutphin writes in to say, the Virginia governor restored voting rights to felons, but they have to request it. So I'm collecting signatures for ballot access, HOD 59, and finding an unmistakable majority of African-American males have had their voting rights stripped. He said this needs to be addressed on the federal level. Any thoughts?
Well, the difficulty of addressing this on the federal level, and there was some legislation that was introduced by Senator, I think, Ben Cardin. He's, I think, out of Maryland, the Democracy Restoration Act. The problem is that there's a separation of between state and federal government, and you have what you call state rights, and voting is exclusively given to those states. Now, the federal government does have some restrictions or parameters, but that's where we see the felon disenfranchisement policy sticking. But in a nutshell, in layman's terms, basically the states decide how they want to run their voting. And the federal government gave them just a little guidance saying that if you deny voting to a certain group of people, if you deny voting to women or otherwise eligible persons, without just cause, then we'll just take away your seats or your representation in Congress. And so the states have been able to get around that through felon disenfranchisement policies, and just by convicting a lot of people. And like I said, it started out with people of color, but our infatuation with mass incarceration has caused this tumor to grow far beyond its intended target.
Right. So listen, you're getting a lot of you're provoking a lot of good questions and comments. So I'm just going to run through a couple of these. Gretchen writes in to say scholarships for students and Social Security benefits for seniors are also denied to people with a felony conviction here in Maine, and housing is an issue too. So this issue of mass incarceration actually reverberates across society.
And you know, it hurts us most in our pockets. I can tell you that now. And as it relates to public safety, one thing we do know is the quicker we help a person reintegrate back into their community, the least likely they are to reoffend. You know, in 2011, when I looked at the budget and I seen that the state allocated $18,000 to incarcerate one inmate, but yet only allocated $3,500 to educate a child, right? While at the same time, we had police unions and firefighter unions being forced back to the collective bargaining table to renegotiate their contract because cities all across the state were not having enough money. And we're seeing that money was in correction, right, in incarcerating individuals. And so not only do we or me as a returning citizen feel the impact of these policies, your everyday tax-paying citizen is also shouldering an enormous burden, and they don't have anything to show for it.
Folks, I'm David Cobb. You're watching Democracy in Action on the Green News Network. We're talking to Desmond Meade, who is the president of the Florida Voting Rights Restoration Coalition, chairman of the Floridians for a Fair Democracy, and chair of the Black Men's Roundtable, part of the Florida Coalition on Black Civic Participation. Desmond, we got tons of questions and comments coming in. Antonio writes in to say, great topic of conversation. I've taken this issue on locally for years, and the voting injustice against formerly incarcerated felons in the U.S. violates the very idea of equality. You want to just comment on that?
Well, you know, the comment I can add to that is, and so let me expand that a little bit, Antonio. So a lot of times when we talk about felon disenfranchisement, right, we talk about America's infatuation with mass incarceration. We always connect it with the individual that's incarcerated, that has served their time and coming back into our community, right? All right, but here's the deal. In Florida, and it's almost in line with the rest of the country, only 25% of people who receive felony convictions even spend time in prison. Think about that for a minute. We have over 1.68 million people in Florida who can't vote. Our prison system only houses about 101,000. You know, the bottom line is that when you look at the data, what the data tells me is that out of every 100 people who are sentenced to or convicted of a felony offense, only 24 of them are sentenced to state prison. So there's a lot of plea bargaining going on, because we know the plea bargain system is what keeps the courts running and prevent it from crashing. And so there are a lot of people who face these same barriers, who never went to prison, but they can't vote. They can't find a job. They can't get a quality education. They can't live where they want to live. And all they want to do is just live the American dream. So I don't want to exclude that, but I need you all to understand that this issue is far bigger than just individuals who are incarcerated. They only represent a small minority of the total amount of American citizens who are denied the ability to have their voice heard.
John Shea writes in with my favorite question. Desmond, he wants to know, how can we help?
But that, you know what? That is definitely the best question of the night. So there's a couple things that we can do. First of all, if you live in Florida and you are a registered voter, then you should download the petition and sign it, and then get other people to sign it and volunteer to collect signatures. That's the easy way. But I have an even easier way that you can support this. And I like to tell people, for the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can help to create a more inclusive democracy in Florida. Well, what do I mean by that? I mean that what we need to help sustain this grassroots movement are people who are willing to donate $5 a month and be a monthly sustainer to this campaign. I always believed, in spite of what the experts said that we couldn't do it, people power got us to this point. And I believe that people power can take us across the finish line. But we're going to need all of your viewers. We're going to need you, David, to actually sign up and be a monthly sustainer to say yes to Second Chances campaign. FloridiansForFairDemocracy.com.
Say that again.
FloridiansForFairDemocracy.com. But however, if that's too long, Samantha Bee's Full Frontal just did a feature last week, and they created another website called Miami Rights. MiamiRights.com. And if you would go to that site, you will see the nice video that we did highlighting this issue, but you'll also have an opportunity to download the petition or donate. Click on that donate button, it takes you to our website.
I can tell you already, Desmond, Michael O'Neill, technical director par excellence, dude has already got the link in our chat, so our viewers are already seeing it.
So that man's getting a star right now.
All right, man. Well, let's get this going. So I'm so sorry, folks. I know that there are other comments and questions that have come in. The last one that we'll be able to take is, let's take this one from Ayava, who writes in to ask, what do you know about interstate cross-check? Because I know that that's something that was used in Florida to try to prevent people from voting and striking voters from the rolls using the voter identification laws. Do you know about that?
No, I really can't comment on that. But what I can comment on is that in Florida, if you were to be in another state and you were convicted of a felony and you lost your right to vote, and that state restored your rights, when you move to Florida, Florida has to honor that, right, and allow you to vote. However, if the crime that you was convicted of in that other state, if it was a federal offense, then no matter how long you've been living with your rights restored, the minute you cross state line into Florida, you will lose those rights all over again. So when you're talking about cross check, that's what comes to mind. The fact that people could cross a border and lose their rights for no reason whatsoever. And then you have people that need to escape in order to get their rights.
So thank you for that. And let me now share with you a little bit of information. Interstate cross-check is a tool that election officials are using in over 24 states. They've compiled a list of citizens whom they allege could be registered to vote in more than one state, which of course would be illegal to cast multiple votes. So they say these people are eligible to be purged from voter rolls. Get this, the data is being processed by an organization called Interstate Voter Registration Crosscheck, which is being promoted by a powerful Republican operative. Check it out. It is an amazing, mostly untold story. Greg Palast wrote a piece on interstate crosscheck that is absolutely chilling. We don't have time. I promise you, Ayuva, we will circle back and have a program on that. At this moment, though, the time has flown by. Desmond, I'm going to give you some final opportunity for final thoughts, final words, and one more time, give us that website.
Yeah, the website is FloridiansForFairDemocracy.com or MiamiRights.com. Definitely share this show with your friends and your network. I thought it was a great show. Thank you for having me on. And remember, listen, we're a nation of second chances. And so I want to encourage all your listeners, all your viewers to really click on the link, print a petition out, sign it, donate, become a monthly sustainer, because with your help, we can transform the state of Florida, which in turn would transform this country.
Beautiful, Desmond Meade. I want to thank you so much for joining us here on Democracy in Action on the Green News Network. As always, a big thank you to Melissa Figueroa, the executive producer at the Green News Network, Michael O'Neill, the technical director, for all the help that he always is. And remember, folks, it's going to be up to us. If we are waiting for somebody else to do it, it ain't going to happen. So get involved, get active. As my dear friend Head Rock, the mayor of DC Hip Hop, often says, if you want to change your situation, you better join an organization, because we can't do it alone. It's going to take all of us. Desmond Meade, thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you, Michael O'Neill. Thank you, Malaysia. Thank you, the viewer of Democracy in Action. We're out for tonight. Join us next week when we'll talk to Caitlin Johnstone, and I am looking forward to that conversation. Desmond, thanks again. Good night.
Thank you.
Peace.